in my business that I had in my 20s, we were a manufacturer's rep from a consultancy. And when we would interview, we would get contracts because I would tell people, look, you can hire all these other guys. They're really good. We're mercenaries. We will fucking kill for you. And I would say, like, look, we'll make sure your competition doesn't eat.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what you're looking for, you hire us. And I would interview with 2 companies in the same day, and they would start competing for us.
Wow.
Because that was like how my whole world outlook was: don't win, destroy.
Do you want to build a business that is able to grow by itself and really being able to do all the heavy lifting so you're not being stressed? Dare I even say, do you want to build a business that it is able to grow without you being there so that you can create true wealth and freedom? Now, I know that these are bold statements, but I feel really confident that I can back these up, because in this episode, we sit down with one of my great friends, one of my mentors, Alex Charfen, a truly remarkable individual. Alex knows entrepreneurs better than I don't think anyone else. He's the world's best when it comes to this. And this is a beautiful conversation when we sit down to really peeling back, what is it when it comes to an entrepreneur? Why do some succeed remarkably, and why do some fail or struggle for such a long time? So when it comes to really understanding who it is that you need to be able to be the best entrepreneur, to be able to build the greatest business, to have the best impact, doing the work that you love, I think this episode is going to be for you. Now, if you're joining us on the podcast, please join us over on the YouTube channel as well, because this is where you're going to be able to see us sit down and have this amazing conversation together that is beautifully shot. And also, if you're going to share this out on social, please tag myself and Alex, as well, as I would personally love to say thank you for you joining us in this episode.
I actually have something to give you when we finish after this. And so I was pondering on our friendship this morning and how much I respect, admire, and love you. You're an incredible, remarkable man and a human being, and I mean that with every fiber of my being.
Thanks, man.
Every conversation that I've had with you, and we had one recently that you very thankfully gave a lot of time and energy for me to be able to help me work through a period of what I'm working through right now. But every conversation I walk away tremendously better. So I'm going to have that exact same expectation for right now.
I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't let you down.
So we're going to do that.
I'm batting 1,000, but holy crap, that's a big
keep
average.
That up. I'm keeping your benchmark right now.
Dude, I feel the same way, just so you know. Like, from the first time we met, I think it was at one of Taki's events. I remember being there and watching you walk in the room, and I'm like, holy shit, that guy changes the lights when he walks in. Like, really. And that's where we met, right? It was at one of Taki's events, I think in Newport Beach or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Beach. I can't remember if it was Newport. Yeah. But I remember I had a conversation with you and with Phil Graham. And those were the only 2 conversations that stood out. I mean, I had hundreds of conversations that week. But I remember talking to you and thinking like, oh man, I think that guy and I are going to be friends. And I went back to the room and Katie's like, well, how was it? And I'm like, well, I met this guy, Chris. He's intense. And she's like, what's he like? Well, you know those statues in Rome? Chris is the improved product. I'm like, he's that guy. And then I'm like, but then you talk to him and he's not, he's not what you typically expect. And so I'm really grateful for our friendship. And that last conversation we had was life-changing for me.
Thank you, dude. I appreciate that. Yeah. And I have journaled on this and I have written this, and this is like, your friendship and you is a relationship that I want lifelong.
Yeah, me too.
So thank you, dude.
Yeah.
So
I'm stoked about tomorrow.
Dude, I'm super pumped for tomorrow. So actually, let's talk about that. I think that might be a good jumping off point, because I feel so guilty for what will come from tomorrow already, which is ridiculous when I actually logically think about it. But I can feel the emotion of it inside. And so, for context, we're having a fun day together.
Yeah.
A day that is for fun. I can't tell you the last time I did this.
Same here. I've actually been thinking about it and been like, what do we do? Like, I don't know how to just have fun for a day.
No.
And play for a day.
Yeah,
I really had to think about it.
Yes, 100%. And I feel disappointed in myself for being in this situation, and for me having to admit, I don't know, when I've been able to do this.
Yeah, it feels weird.
Why is that so? Because I have also got the sense that there will be a lot of other, just let's label them entrepreneurs, that would be in the exact same boat.
Yeah. Well, I think that maybe there will be entrepreneurs that say like, oh, I know how to have fun. But then if they really think about it, like if you're just given a whole free day and like the opportunity to do whatever, it's a very foreign feeling. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're not going out on a boat. There's no destination. There's no plan. And I think that as entrepreneurs, part of how we value ourselves or create value or self-worth is productivity. Mm-hmm. And we all define productivity differently. But I think for most entrepreneurs, for myself included, it's like how many hours are you putting into it to create self-worth? Like that's, if you really want to look at the reality, it's like if you're not putting enough hours, you don't have value. It's one of the things that happens in our mastermind all the time where, we show people how to go from working 60 or 70 hours a week down to maybe 40 or 50, and then down to 20 or 30 or 40, and then 20 or 30. And there's somewhere in there for every entrepreneur where they break. Like their business has doubled or tripled and they crack. And I think I told you about this with Daniel Rosen. Did I tell you that story?
No.
So I work with this extraordinary entrepreneur, like one of the nicest people you've ever met. His name's Daniel Rosen, and he runs a company called Credit Repair Cloud, which is one of the most unique companies I've ever seen. And it's born from a place of pain for him. When he was in his life, there was a point where his credit here in the States got messed up and he couldn't get a place to live and he ended up homeless.
Oh, wow.
And it was not his fault. Like he didn't mess up his credit, but like things got reported incorrectly and he kind of was like a victim of the system. And so he learned how to fix credit because it was such an offense to his life. And so he, for years, was teaching people how to fix their credit. And then 5 years ago, he started a software company on how to like show people how to fix credit. And now he owns this company called Credit Repair Cloud. And they put people in the credit repair business so other people can help people that were in his situation. And 80% of the people he works with are from underprivileged communities. Wow. So his whole community is like Black and Mexican and a lot of American Indian and like all kinds of people who have credit issues. So when he told me it was 80%, I'm like, Daniel, that's the highest ratio I've ever heard. Are you sure about that? And it really is. And he's got pictures of like the groups of people that are now running $1 million businesses within his software.
Wow.
It's awesome. And so when Daniel came to us, he was like literally doing all the customer service tickets, writing the website, like involved in the software, all and just completely overwhelmed and breaking. And so we showed him how to like cut things back. And there was this event where we put him up on stage on a panel. So we put Daniel on stage on a panel, and it was like the success panel. Yeah. And I always tell all my members, like, look, this is a place where we're transparent. You don't send your representative, like say what's really going on. We don't want any type of like nonsense here because everybody feels it and it's uncomfortable. And if you're doing that in front of the room, other people are like, oh, well then I need to do that too. And so I introduced the panel, and Daniel introduced himself, and then I had a conversation with somebody else. I came back to Daniel, and like he's like, well, Alex, I know I'm supposed to be the successful one up here because his business had gone from like 2 million to 8 million. Yeah. And he's like, but I'm not doing too great. And I said, well, what's happening, Daniel? And he goes, well, I've been running this business, I think he said at the time like 10 years or 12 years, and I've always had something to do, and I've always felt like I was productive, and I've always felt like I was making things happen and doing the right things. And now I put all your systems in place and the business doesn't need me. And he started crying, and he's like, I don't know what I should do anymore. And Iki, who was his operator at the time, he's like, Iki tells me not to go to certain meetings. That I just don't need to be there, that, it's a distraction. And so I'm not allowed to go to meetings, and I'm not, and he's like, I'm not allowed to do all these things, and I don't understand what I should do anymore. And we helped him work it out. He's in a much happier place now. But it was interesting that, he came to us because of this level of overwhelm that was breaking him. And as soon as that wasn't this major tether in his life anymore, he felt completely like afloat and adrift. And I think that like that's just a good story, like a good representation of what happens to all of us. I think most entrepreneurs build businesses seeking freedom, but what they really do is they build businesses that make them feel significant, and thereby they have no freedom.
Okay, so
By the way, just for the story with Daniel Rosen, we used our systems and we had his team. So there's this point in a business where you hit around $10 million, really between 10 and 30, where you give up autonomy of time.
Yes.
And what that means is, it doesn't mean you give the team all of your time. What it means is you no longer designate what you should do. And if you've built the right leadership team around you, that leadership team should tell you, here's where we need you.
Yes.
And if you're still trying to say, like, here's where I'm going to be,
yes.
a lot of times you become the most disruptive force in the business. And because if you think about it, when you're at 10 to 30 million, you can't possibly see all of the cracks and fissures and things that you need to fill in. And so if you're running around trying to find those and fix them, you become like this ping pong ball that's running around all and like knocking everything over. And or like pinball that's running around knocking everything over. And so we had his team create a 4-hour document for him and like give him a description. And so he ended up like doing videos, talking to members, interviewing people, doing their ads, thinking about marketing and not having to do the marketing. And that took probably 20 or 30 hours a week where he felt really happy and really productive and excited about it. And as a result, in the past few years, not as a result of just that, like Daniel's brilliant. There's a lot of things that went into it, but that was part of what got him from 8 to I think they're at about 35 now.
Wow.
Yeah, 35 people, 120 or 130 employees, and all distributed around the world. And if you talk to Daniel today, he's one of the happiest entrepreneurs I know.
Oh, wow. That makes me so happy hearing that.
Yeah.
So I label you as one of the best people when it comes to understanding entrepreneurs, understanding how organizations and businesses should run, and being able to teach and show how entrepreneurs create that. And I say that with full conviction because that's what you did for me. And so today, I'll happily share this. I really only run it about 6 hours a week under my CEO SOP. And it was very interesting because this could have happened so much sooner, but I was stuck doing the things I shouldn't have been doing for so long. And it was interesting because it was only about a week before actually flying here, I'd organised my head coach. He was in Bali because I've flown him out to put him up so we can like work together, like on site together for a few months. And I booked a videographer for us to shoot ad creatives. And it was soon after we had our conversation and I rocked up to where we were shooting the videos and I was like, I don't need to be in these videos. I was like, Josh, you're shooting the videos. I'm not even going to be in these anymore. And then suddenly I just sat back and then I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually no longer the face of the business anymore. This amazing human being, Josh, which is doing remarkable work that I have full trust and faith in, is being able to now shoot the ad creatives to be able to get this. And his story, I believe, is much stronger than my story. And I'm like, oh my God, like it was bringing tears to my eyes. And I also remember the first time I cried for sure being the passenger for the first time in a meeting. Holy shit, that is a game changer as well. But it's funny because isn't that the reason why we actually build these businesses 100%. In the first place? Like
that's our belief.
Yes, 100%. But we don't do that.
Yeah.
Like I don't think we're able to truly create it because we're not able to actually see it happen. So therefore, we're not able to use mimesis to make it happen. And I think that's what you're doing so powerful because I've wrote this in this letter that I have for you, but it is because of the way that you show up, Alex. It's literally giving people a model to be able to work off for them to create it properly as well. Because as we know, there's so much stuff that happens in this world of business that's smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of it actually comes... I like to use Hanlon's law, which is... I don't want to put it down to arrogance. I want to put it down to stupidity.
Yeah.
I want to give people the benefit of the doubt
or
that their heart's in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah. Stupidity or maybe just ignorance.
Ignorance. Yes.
Like not knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when it comes to having the right model for the entrepreneur that's joining us right now, how do you want to help guide them so they can actually start creating, whether they've just starting or whether they're in the thick of it right now, how can they change the direction so that they're now creating a business that truly serves what their intention is, which is creating freedom for themselves?
You know, I could like cascade into a bunch of tactics, but I think the first step of that process is getting real about what you actually want and where you actually are as a human being, because there are infinite examples in the world today of radically successful entrepreneurs who have created a treadmill of their own making, and they're not getting off. And you know, you can watch them all day, and you can watch them on social media, and you can see, and I'm talking people who are like 8 and 9 figures successful, but still have created this never-ending amount of noise and energy and stuff around them. And for some entrepreneurs, like, I'm not knocking it. I've helped people do that because that's what they really wanted. They feel the significance in being booked 60, 70, 80 hours a week and having something to do all the time. But if there's an entrepreneur who really is building a business so they have more time for family, so they have more time for themselves, so that they can be introspective, so that they can grow as a person, not that you can't doing those other things, but it makes it infinitely more difficult. I think it's just getting clear on that first, because when you first start in entrepreneurship, the whole goal is let's just make this work. Like, how do I just get cash to come in, right? And it feels like a magic trick. It's like the first time, I remember in my 20s, the first time that I got a check out of an actual business that I started on my own, and it was just mine, and I'm like, oh my God, it's happening. Yeah. Like, it worked. And I had such doubt right up until the check was literally in my hands. And I think that what happens is, successfully starting a business, you must do everything. There's no other way to do it. At least I haven't found it, unless you have tons of funding or you take on investor capital, and then that comes with all kinds of other things. But you know, we have to understand human conditioning is a real thing. Pavlov proved that if you ring the bell, the dog salivates. And so that operant conditioning of starting a business, you have to do everything. It gives us this deep psychological belief that if we're not doing everything, then we won't be successful. It actually, successfully starting a business and doing everything conditions us that success means doing everything. And that's what Daniel was feeling. You know, that untethered adrift feeling of not having to do it all was actually terrifying.
Yeah.
And I don't think that most people have ever like talked about this or had the conversation or seen an example of it, because here's what I think happens all the time in our world. You go to a mastermind, or you go to an event, or you go to, you know, some type of gathering of entrepreneurs, and the person who's put on stage is the guy who has the $8 million, the $10 million, the $20 million business. In some rooms, it might be the person with the $2 million, the $3 million, the $4 million. And I know a lot of those people. And when they get onto the platform, you take on this persona of like, I'm the successful person, and none of them say like, guys, this sucks. You know, like, I haven't seen my wife in 2 weeks. And, you know, and I'm sleeping in a hotel room every night, and I don't really know my kids that well. And, you know, that's never what's shared in front of the room. What's shared in front of the room is the successes and the awards and the wins and how big the team is and how many people they've helped, which makes us all feel really good. But we don't there's not an open dialogue about like, okay, how do you extricate yourself from both the belief system and the reality that you feel like you have to do everything? Because it's one, you know this because you've gone through it. It's one of the most vulnerable feelings ever as an entrepreneur, to create a world where you don't have to be there, because we derive so much significance from that necessity.
The story that I told before was definitely a partial story, because I'm still very much suffering through trying to find how I do that. And it is so interesting because let's use some labels of an archetype, for example. It's like, I was a great warrior, working, putting in the effort, the hours, grinding. If you ask me to run through a wall, I'll do it happily. And then me now needing to move to like a king, or even how Dane would say, like a wizard. I find, like I find that I'm like, I feel that viscerally of, wow, that's what we should be doing, because then we can have such a greater impact once I'm able to ascend past my ego that is wanting to just like be in the grind and of that now. What's your advice for people being able to make that transition to a wizard? And so for context as well, there was, what was Dane's levels of hierarchy? There was there was a employee, and then there was a manager, entrepreneur, investor, wizard.
Yeah.
Oh,
I remember when he first put that together and he first said it, I wrote it down. Like, oh man, this is so confronting.
Yeah.
Because, in the hierarchy that I'm in, like I've already won.
Yes.
And in the hierarchy that he created, there's 2 levels I haven't thought of. Like, oh crap, like how do I get there?
So what was the other, he had a saying that it was just like a knife into my heart.
If you're working too hard, then you're a shit magician.
that hit me hard. And
Me too.
In a really positively challenging way.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm a shit magician. And I think that's brilliant. I think you said it very wisely, which was like, you're great entrepreneur, but a shit wizard.
Yeah.
Okay, what do we need to do? What's your internal dialogue? What are you doing to go from successful entrepreneur to successful wizard?
So first, just for the sake of transparency, like this is, I was working with Dane for the past couple of years in different programs he had for that reason. Because when you say like, I was a great warrior, I think so much of my life has revolved around just that, around just being a warrior. And I think it's, now working through some of the stuff that I have, like there's past life of warrior. I mean, I think that my soul has been a warrior soul for as long as it's existed. And in my business that I had in my 20s, we were a manufacturer's rep from a consultancy. And when we would interview, we would get contracts because I would tell people, look, you can hire all these other guys. They're really good. We're mercenaries. We will fucking kill for you. And I would say, like, look, we'll make sure your competition doesn't eat.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what you're looking for, you hire us. And I would interview with 2 companies in the same day, and they would start competing for us.
Wow.
Because that was like how my whole world outlook was: don't win, destroy. And don't just make things like you're number 1. You have to be number 1 by such a large margin that no one else can breathe. Talking about it right now, it's like making me feel a little anxious, because that's really like, that's the lens through which I saw everything. And so much of my success came out of that lens. Like here, having, when you think about that conversation, that's not a kind conversation, but it was a conversation that I reveled in. And we used to keep notches on a board of how many people we put out of business, because it was like, that was a proud moment for us. Like, oh, we took out another one. Not ever thinking like there's human beings on the other side of this coin. And it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, but I always looked at it that way. And so at 49, I'm now way more aware that I feel that way. Life's no longer a zero-sum game, but getting out of the place where I build a system around myself that just gives me significance has been really difficult. It's a transition that I've been working on for years, and really going through in a serious way right now, where we were talking before we started rolling that I continue to create these systems where I'm not going to be the central focus and the central figure, and then somehow it happens again, and then somehow it happens again, and I know that's my own making because I'm in charge. And I know that somehow, some parts consciously, I think in some way less than consciously, I derive significance just like every other entrepreneur from having that level of importance that comes from being in that seat where everybody needs you. And so I think in so many ways it's so funny, because when I was younger, if somebody ever said this to me, I would have laughed him out of the room. But I think getting clear on yourself and understanding yourself and doing the right types of therapy, and I 100% believe in psychedelic therapies, and the appropriate use of psychedelics to like open up your mind to different ways of thinking. Because so many, like when I look at the equation of entrepreneur, it's like massive childhood trauma, and then you work it out for the rest of your life. And whatever you can do to accelerate that will help you let go of these like tethers of needing to be significant and needing to be important. And I've never worked with a 9-figure entrepreneur that didn't have massive childhood trauma. Never, not once. And the billionaires that I've met, dude, like there's an exchange. There's an exchange for like being at that level and being able to hold space for all of that. It doesn't come from being grounded and supported and being given what you need and being nurtured. It actually comes from the opposite. So you can stand in this fire where there's so much noise that you don't feel it. And so when we get to the place where we start feeling it and we're willing to admit we're feeling it, and then we do work on ourselves, then you can start to move out of it. And it's interesting, the story that I shared about Daniel, and almost every entrepreneur that I ever worked with over 3 million, who's in one of my programs, joins kind of a secondary group that we have where it's just businesses over 3 million, and most of the time it's businesses over 8 figures. And 100% of them go do some type of therapy. Everyone. I recommend EMDR therapy. I've recommended psychedelic therapy to a lot of them, either ketamine, which is legal here in the United States, or stuff that maybe hasn't been approved yet but will be soon. And so often the catalyst to that next stage of massive growth is really being able to let go, because you find significance somewhere other than the hours spent, and being able to let go because you start to understand your trauma. I worked with this guy, Cosmo Khosravi. Dude, so talented, such an amazing entrepreneur, hilarious. He's so fun to watch on YouTube. He runs a company called Cosmo's Q. His name's actually Darian, but he goes by Cosmo, and he's a world champion pitmaster.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
But like barbecuing,
yeah.
And he sponsors like 7 world champions, and there's like this whole organization around it. It's this huge multi-billion dollar industry now. And in my program, through going to therapy, Cosmo came to the realization that when he was a kid, he was playing with fire or something, and he got burned. And he was in a burn ward for, I think, the better part of a year.
Oh, wow.
And his parents didn't visit him, and he didn't have like a lot of interaction with people, and he was in this place where he was pretty much abandoned. And that is what made him go out and do all of this other stuff to like get attention and have people like him and attract energy. And we were having a conversation. I can't remember where we were, and he said, like, what do I need to do to get this business to the next level? And I think it was at like 5 or 6 million, and he was kind of stumbling around and stuff. And I said, Cosmo, you got to work on yourself first. Like, you can put all the time you want into this business, but it's going to be a reflection of your internal dialogue and the conflict that's going on inside you. And he recently did a podcast on it where he tells that story. And he went and started working on himself, and he was able to start treating people a little different and like release some of the unfair expectations that he had and on himself and on others. And that business is now in the tens of millions. I don't know exactly where it is, but last time I checked in with him, it was somewhere between like 25 and 35.
Okay, so I'm writing copious notes here on questions I want to ask you. This is amazing. And there's 2 things actually come to my mind first, which is, did I tell you my idea about a show that I want to do? Okay.
I don't think so, maybe.
Inspired by Jerry Seinfeld?
Oh, the comedians in cars getting coffee? Yeah, you told me, but yours was different, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's like entrepreneurs.
Super quickly. For the listener right now, randomly, Laura and I, one night, I turned Netflix on and I put Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And within a couple minutes, I'm having this huge epiphany about how he has created this amazing container of him doing the work that he loves, like in his genius. I'm like, this is amazing. Like he loves cars, he loves coffee, and he loves like doing cracking jokes and talking with great comedians, and he's created the work that he loves. And I'm having this huge epiphany. Lauren clearly wasn't picking up what I was putting down during She did not care about my epiphany whatsoever. I'm seriously like, I'm seeing dimensions at the moment. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then she just turns around and she goes, well, why don't you create your own? And so I stopped like watching, and I was just thinking, I was like, well, what would my 3 things be that I would really want to be able to do? And I thought about this when you brought up the psychedelics, because I was like, oh, I want it to be philosophers going on a walk on mushrooms. So if you're cool with it, we've got to find a time when we're going to do an episode of that. That'd be really cool. But I think when it comes down to this is the work I find really interesting, and I want to see if I can bridge this gap between the immense knowledge that that you've put into what you call the billionaire code and the stages of growth of a business. Can I take that back and take that to the stages of growth of the entrepreneur running that business?
Yeah.
What's the work typically, we can kind of like label this? What's the work they need to do as those stages go from left to right?
So at each individual stage, there's work the entrepreneur needs to do. But if you look at it as a continuum, as a spectrum, from the day you open your business to the day it hits $100 million or more, it's a process of learning to let go. And, it's a process of learning to let go. It's a process of learning to trust, which is so hard for most entrepreneurs. One of the reasons we're so good at developing businesses is because there's a lack of trust. And we go and check everything, and we double check everything, we look at everything. And like Daniel, who's in his own customer service tickets with a multi-million-dollar business. And if you look at, for me, and I tell my members this all the time, like the further you go to the right of the billionaire code, each new level that you reach, you are giving up a massive amount of knowledge and attachment, and you have to let go like crazy. And the further that you go in that direction, the more you're solving this equation we have as entrepreneurs of making increasingly difficult decisions with less and less information. And you can't argue that. You will always have less when the company was one person, you had all the information, right? And so from that point forward, you always have less and less information, increasingly difficult decisions. And so for an entrepreneur, learning to let go and trust and allow, like to understand that if you put an intelligent person in place and you coach them and give them the right tools and you lead them in the right way, that sure, they're gonna make mistakes, we all do, but let them learn from their mistakes and let them correct those mistakes and let them understand their position, let them know what they need to do. And the larger the company gets, the more crucial that becomes. And, occasionally I'll see entrepreneurs who are running 40, 50, $100 million companies, and they're still in that place where they're double checking everybody. And, I think in the entrepreneurial world, we all look at success as how many dollars are coming in, but I've spent so much time with people who have millions of dollars a month coming in, and they're some of the most unhappy people I've ever met. And no joy, no joy. The level of paranoia that's through the roof, and a level of restless agitation that just never calms down. And it's because if we don't get to that place where we're willing to let go and trust, then you end up in a place where it's not a treadmill of your own making, it's a prison of your own making.
I love where this is going because this is going to connect a couple of dots for me. When it comes to us deriving meaning, I'm going to talk out loud and see if I can get these thoughts together. We start a business because we want to feel something, and a lot of that is coming down to a meaning that we want to create from it as a provider, as someone that's, let's just even put it under the label of successful. Now, if I didn't need to create meaning from that, I could get it from somewhere else.
Normal people seem to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like that's what I'm going to. And so actually this question I'm going to ask comes from James, which was the guy that inspired me to want to become a filmmaker, because I asked him recently what his intention was, and his response was becoming nobody. And it was so freeing to be able to hear him say that, and I was like, whoa, you are developed. That is a beautiful point to be able to get to, and seeing him like traverse through those planes, and not with difficulty with it as well. But how can we have a scoreboard or a feedback mechanism or a way for us to be able to know that we're deriving meaning so that we don't have to pull it out and do it wrong from the business, or expect the business to do something that it shouldn't actually do in the first place?
I think this might be like not an answer exactly to your question, but like what you need to avoid in order to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
I think that, at 49, I've now been running businesses since I was in my teens. And when I think of the pressures on entrepreneurs today that are so different than what they were when I was a kid, I mean, Chris, today, You have to have a successful business and 100,000 followers on Instagram and a following on Facebook, and you have to keep them on posting your stuff and show everybody your life and document what you're doing. And I think back, like in my 20s, I ran a multi-million-dollar company. I documented nothing. I don't care. I want everyone to hear that that's not the only way to do it. And I think that we've created the environment we're in has created this new paradigm of success where it's not just successfully running a company, but it's successfully running the company, sharing it all, letting people in, being transparent online, or at least like the appearance of transparent online, and all of this other image stuff that I'm so glad I didn't have to deal with when I was younger. And I think so many entrepreneurs today get caught up in all of those things to the detriment not just of their business, but themselves. And in the past few years, I've met tons of entrepreneurs that the facade is one of wild success. Hundreds of thousands of followers and people reaching out to them all the time and people wanting to show up at events. And then you peek around the curtain and there's really very little there. And it's because we're in this environment where social influence is now seen as one of the highest currencies that there is. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk's an amazing entrepreneur, and there's a lot of people who really love what he puts out there. And I think recently he's been putting a lot better stuff out there, but I remember him once saying, like, attention is the new currency. And I remember thinking, no, man, currency's the currency. Like, I can't tell you how many people I know who have massive attention, but that attention doesn't translate into anything. And so maybe attention with an application of turning it into revenue is the new currency. But I think so many entrepreneurs have been sold this like belief that that's where you go first and that's what you need to do first. And I see people spending tons of time trying to create that attention, when if you go create a really wickedly successful business, attention will follow you whether you want it to or not. It'll be there.
I failed over the last few years similar with this, and I am disappointed in myself because like I took myself off Instagram for about 18 months, deleted off my phone, stopped the whole thing, and I deleted all of the posts, but I've gone back onto it because I told myself a story that it was a game that I needed to play. And I say that with a heavy heart, if I could be honest, because I don't know if I made the right move. I want to share to be able to really help people, and I generally only post when I know that this is good quality. But at the same time, I don't know if this is a game I want to play.
But when I read your stuff, it feels like it's somewhat cathartic.
Oh, it's definitely,
it is, right?
It is feeding me for sure. Like it is medicine that I'm drinking.
Yeah. I think that there's a difference there, Chris. I think there's a way to use these things in a way that creates catharsis, in a way that creates connection, in a way that creates community, but real connection and community and real catharsis. And I think, I wouldn't put that in the same realm as getting attention for attention's sake.
I appreciate that.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I appreciate that. There is a part of me that still is like, oh, but what if you had more people to share that message? Wouldn't it be more successful? And I don't like that thought.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like the person that has that belief.
Yeah. I can remember a few months ago I was going to do a cold plunge.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I cold plunge every day.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
every time I have to talk to myself into it. It's never a yes, cold plunge, right? Never. And I was standing outside of the tub, and now I don't even allow myself 5 seconds because it'll turn into 15, then 30, and then I'm like, do I need to do this? And there was this day where I was like, oh, I really don't want a cold plunge. I'll put it on Instagram. And then I went in cold plunge, and getting out of the cold plunge, I'm like, okay, I'm never doing that again. I'm never, I do not want to be motivated by creating the image.
Great awareness.
Of that. And since that day, I've cold plunged every day and never put it on Instagram. But the second I could feel that I started making choices in my life because of what image would create, that felt like a very slippery slope, going off the deep end a little bit. Even though it was just that one time, it caused me to introspect and say, okay, wait a second, I'm doing this more often. If I'm conscious of it now, it's not the first time.
Yes. Yes,
And if I'm conscious of it right now, then what other equations are going on in my life right now that I'm doing for something other than what I really want?
Yeah. I remember Gary Vee actually saying something, and I think this is quite true, where he's like, there's someone in the world right now climbing a mountain just so they can take a photo of it and put it on Instagram.
100%.
And it's sickening. The gym that I go to, they ban tripods at the gym.
What's crazy is you have to ban them.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's because so many people were taking videos of themselves training so they could put it on social media. And like, look, I come from the fitness business world. I'm like, you're doing the wrong thing. Like, you're focusing on the wrong thing to get to the outcome of having a successful business. But anyway, I don't want to go down that slippery slope.
Oh, but doesn't that like say so much about what's going on?
Oh, yeah.
I remember when I was younger, going to the gym was like my quiet place. That was my recovery. That was, when I was younger, I didn't understand meditation. I didn't understand yoga, any of those things. Lifting really heavy weights was one of the few ways that like all the noise went away. When you're under 300 or 400 pounds, or there's only one thing you can focus on, and it's very much like driving a car on a track. Like, if you're not paying attention, you're in trouble. And so that was like a meditation. And I think about like what would have happened back then if I was racking the weights and hitting record. Like, that goes from being a quiet meditative place to a performance place.
Yeah.
And it becomes, it shifts the dynamic of what you're doing for yourself so much. I think, these days I meet a lot of younger entrepreneurs who have their nervous systems are like on a 10 out of 10 or like an 11 out of 10 because they're so wound up. And I think part of that is you get up and you're performing from the second you get up to when you go to sleep. And I also meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are wildly successful and don't even touch social media. And those are the ones that I'm always impressed with.
Okay, I'm asking this selfishly for my, I want the solution to this. How or what is the game that is to be played so that I can create a business that self-grows, gives me the money that I want, and allows me to do the other things that I want?
So like in general, what is it that you need to do?
In general, but I would also love to know your opinion on how the social media landscape plays into it today. So for example, what we're doing now has nothing to do with my businesses. This is purely a project that I want to do where I want to learn from the best and be able to apply it. And I'm more than happy to document this through and just be like, this is what I'm learning right now. So I feel really at ease, really aligned with that, because I'm not doing the dog and pony dance of trying to look at me, do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of it also comes from, and I had this conversation with Kylie and she really nailed this, which was the case of so many people are trying to be authentic and putting stuff out there into the world, but there is a dark side of it where it's clearly trying to do something that's not where the authenticity comes from.
Yeah.
And
it's like a forced authenticity.
yes, which is not authentic.
Or performative authenticity,
Yeah.
which is
Totally.
so
And I believe
uncomfortable.
success comes from what is the motivation behind the act that you do in the first place. I don't even know what the question is I'm trying to ask right now, Alex. I'm trying to get you to pick up what I'm
Well, I
putting
have
down.
an example. I have an example. So, because I work on this too, Chris. Like, I have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and I lean. A lot of the stuff that goes out there, my team will pull it from a podcast or pull it from a conversation that I have with someone, so that we have a presence there. Because today in business, if you're not there, it looks like you're out of business.
Yeah.
So we do enough to maintain. But man, Sam Ovens is such an interesting example of this. I don't know him.
Cat.
I don't know him. I've never been in. I've purchased a couple of his programs. I've looked at his stuff. He's a brilliant entrepreneur, and he refuses to play the game because when and if I back out like what I know and what I've seen of him, Sam's got 100,000 followers on Instagram without a single post. And he puts 100% of his efforts into YouTube because it's what he's comfortable with, and it's a long tail, and he wants it to be there forever. And so that's the one place where all of his posts go. And if you listen to him, and I know a couple of people who know him and are like, friends with him, and I ask, so tell me what he's like and what is he really trying to do? And so Sam's completely deliberate. He is an introvert. He doesn't want to be interrupted. He wants a ton of time and space for creative thinking. And so he's set up the entire business that he has to provide him with that. And so I think he's such a fascinating example of how you can beat the system today. And I've followed Sam's numbers, or at least the numbers he shares publicly, and I actually think he's real. I don't think he makes stuff up. I think he's so clear in how he shares things. I don't think he's sharing made up numbers. And so he had a business that was at 35 million and was running at 10 or 15% margin, and he's reduced his business down to I think 10 million, running at 75% margin. And so you look at somebody like that who says, okay, the outcome is first, everything else is second. And I think for a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we forget to set the outcome first. We forget to put the boundaries in place. We forget to put constraint in place. And again, I think it goes back to starting a business is one of the hardest things that anybody's ever done. And so putting constraint around that and saying, I'm going to stop certain things from happening, I'm not going to do certain things. It's like, man, if this was the hardest thing I ever did, how can I put boundaries around that? How can I put constraint around that? But there's incredible examples of people out there who do.
I love that you used his example, because it was a mutual friend of ours that actually put me onto him when he kind of like came back. And did you see his video where he explained his business model, and then it turned into a brilliant pitch as well? So that even just like watching what he was doing was brilliant.
Yeah.
And then I actually sent that video to my leadership team, and I was like, watch this. This is really good, and let's have a discussion about this later.
My leadership team and I watched it too.
Yeah.
Like, that was so good.
So good. And so, okay, I had to write down a note just for myself for that. So this is really good.
I think, Chris, another answer to maybe what you were saying is like, what do you say to the entrepreneur who wants to create that environment, that place where they want to be? Is I think that we have to admit what we really want, and not just admit it, but do the work to get clear on what do we really want. Part of the reason that I was working with Dane over the past couple of years, and he and I have become we've become good friends. He's an awesome human being, so different than I am, like polar opposites. Like, he's like got 26 girlfriends and a wife, and I'm like a monogamous married, and like we could not be more different if you had to like line item it out. But the similarity that we have is we're both entrepreneurs. And Dane is one of those people that first thinks of the outcome and then backs into the situation. And it's fascinating because the amount of time that he puts on aiming, most entrepreneurs are fire, ready, aim. Dane like meditates and thinks about it and visualizes it and sees how it's going to feel, and then if it doesn't feel right, he backs out, and then he says, okay, how do I make this feel right? And he gets super clear on what he wants. Then he starts rolling out the product, and then he starts rolling everything else out. And I can't remember how much it was, but he recently rolled out this new product, and he's having like the biggest months he's ever had in his life with the lowest amount of effort, and his clients are having the biggest success. And it becomes from him really like getting into that place where he has thought through, really, he's done so much thinking about it, so much preparation for it, that he's thought through the contingencies, and he already knows what's going to happen. And that, when I watched him doing that, when I observed him doing that, when I listened to him, that's one of the things that really drew me to working with him, was how do you get to that level of manifestation where, manifestation always sounds like a magic trick when you hear it in the public, right? But what is manifestation really? It's putting in a tremendous amount of analysis to understand what you really want, then prioritizing those things, then committing to actually having those things in your life, and then in that commitment period, you do the activity that you need to do, and then you let go, and then that's what comes back to you. And that in our company, we have a 5-step process that, like, if you had to look at everything we do, it's analyze, prioritize, commit, then execute, and then renew, go back and do it all again. And what I realized was, in Dane's process, analyze is 80% of it.
Oh, wow.
And for the rest of us, execute or commit and execute is like 90% of it. And so he does so much work up here that by the time he's executing, he already knows what's going to happen.
Is that the difference between the entrepreneur and the wizard?
It might be.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Might be. Some of the most wildly successful entrepreneurs I know that are able to set up businesses and then not have to be personally involved and can check in on them and then can like spin a whole bunch of plates at once, they do it that way. They have such a high level of clarity going into it that they already know what's going to be needed.
It's interesting what you said about wanting before and like having to do the work to know what you want. I just read a book called Wanting that talks to mimetic theory and how much what we want isn't actually what we want. It's been planted on us, or we've picked it up from so many other examples around us, and it's what we've done as human beings forever, for so long, and that's how we get there. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about, the brilliance that you are, is because it is from what you're doing that allows myself and others, and what I know will come from this conversation is people now have a new model to be able to mimic. And I think that's one of the most important things that we could possibly do. And that's what you're doing. So I really appreciate that.
But you know what, Chris, like, so it's interesting that you say that about me, right? Because I think as coaches, let me phrase this correctly. I think the beginning of every coach's journey is solving a wound.
Yes.
And you can see it. Like, if you watch a lot of the coaches out there, it's like, oh man, you haven't really figured this out yet, and you're coaching at E. You know, it's like you're still in the wounded state. And for me, when I was younger, I was able to have the vision to create a business, and oftentimes that vision or that idea would grow so fast that I couldn't keep up with it. And it would overwhelm me, and details overwhelm me, and too much interaction with people overwhelms me. And so when I was younger, I had this survival need to be able to not have to do it all, and be able to, like, okay, I need to let go of this and let go of this and let this other person do this. And the business that I ran in my 20s grew from like me in a bedroom in Orlando to 5 or 6 offices within a few years, and 14 offices by the time I was 30, and like hundreds of millions of dollars in responsibility of other people's business. And in that time period, I had to figure out what structure can I do this in to where I don't go crazy. And so much of what I teach and coach today is because it was one of the biggest issues, like one of the biggest weaknesses for me, one of the biggest challenges for me. And so today, for me to coach somebody who's a $10 million, $20 million, $30 million, however big the business is, I can always like have a conversation with them over the course of an hour or two and get to the root of what needs to happen right now. But at the same time, turning that mirror on yourself, for most of us who are coaches, it's really difficult. Like we are always more able to see the wound in others than in ourselves. And so now at 49 and you know, making a lot of decisions in my business and trying to understand and realize what I want to do next, a lot of what I think about is, I don't want to do this from a wounded place. I want to do this like, what am I going to go out and teach from a healed state that I really have mastery over? And that's been something I've been thinking about a lot recently. You know, I think what I teach today and what I share today, I have a level of mastery that you know, one, I'm proud that I'm finally there, but it's also it's also a level of mastery because I've done it for myself over and over again now. You know, I've been able to get myself there, and I'm confident I can get myself there. And when I have situations in business or things that aren't comfortable, I feel that discomfort now, and I'm willing to act on the discomfort. And I think, you know, it's an important thing for us as entrepreneurs to recognize that for a lot of the time that we're entrepreneurs, we are running away from something. You know, there's there's always something compelling us. You know, for me when I was younger, it was being poor and being picked on and being bullied and being like the kid that was always left out. And so I built businesses where everybody had to pay attention to me. And then, you know, there was another period where Katie and I created a tremendous amount of wealth. We lost it in a bankruptcy. Then I was running away from bankruptcy. And then I remember getting to this point where it was like, oh, there's really nothing to run away from here. Like, there's enough money in the bank. Like I told you, we would have to try and go bankrupt. Like, it would be an effort. And I had to transition and say, like, so what am I running towards? And I think that question of like, what am I running towards? What do I really want? That is the hardest question as an entrepreneur to answer. Running away from is the easiest thing in the world. And so many successful entrepreneurs, like I said earlier, I think they're successful because they had really compelling things to run away from. if you listen to entrepreneur stories and you just look for where is it coming from, in almost 100% of the stories, when they're being transparent, when they're real, there's like two stories you can tell. You can tell the story that's on the website. You can tell what really happened, right? And you can tell the exact same time period in all the highlights with skipping all the lowlights. But when you look, like most really wildly successful entrepreneurs have that force compelling them, and I don't think that a very high percentage of entrepreneurs actually ever flip the switch to go into like, where do I really want to go and where do I really want to be? It's disorienting.
I'm going to finish with that, and I want to give a challenge to the viewer when it comes to you answering, what are you running towards? I wrote that down for myself, and I'm going to promise you, Alex, that I am going to spend the time and effort to be able to answer that, because if you ask me that, I could not give you a succinct, truthful answer.
Yeah.
I love you, man. This has been absolutely incredible. I started with questions for yourself, and I've written notes for myself. I'm going to take this piece of paper back home. This is really good. I appreciate you, Alex. You're a remarkable, remarkable man. I love that you are in my life, and I'm very thankful that you've been able to share this now with people that you do around the world. So thank you.
Man. Thanks for the opportunity, Chris. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
We might be a little disoriented.
I'm going to give you a hug, dude, because I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.